congratulations, Coventry, on City of Culture. I'm so pleased Coventry won it. And I probably shouldn't say that because I'm in the Northeast, so I was supposed to be backing a different bid. But to be honest with you, the Coventry bid, the inclusivity and the diversity that was absolutely the foundation of that bid really warmed my heart and made me feel optimistic. So I'm sure all the work that all of you have been doing for years has been a huge part of that. So congratulations, it's great. Second thing, I wanted to start with a question for everybody because I realise you've been sitting listening and I'm blown away by the four women who've gone before me. It's just been fantastic to listen to you. I have so little to add to all that you've said and all of your wisdom. But I would like to know an answer to a really simple question, which is, could you let me know by waving or unmuting and shouting or however you want to do it? Could you let me know if you are 100% confident calling yourself a leader?
Yeah, I am.
We've got a few. That's great. But it's quite a mixed picture. And I think that's not unusual, that sense that there's a mixed picture. Can you let me know if you are 100% confident calling yourself a staggering cultural leader with a great creative presence?
Yeah, that's Melissa and Alex.
There's a couple of people, definitely. Because that is how Richard described you in the email to us. And I think it's interesting when we think about that theme of knowing myself, how happy we are to call ourselves leaders and how happy we are to say, yeah, that's me. I'm that person. And to be honest with you, I've really struggled with it and continue to battle a bit with that identification as a leader. I think a bit like Judith and others have said, I didn't set out to be a leader at all. It's something that I think happened and I became aware of. And when I was thinking about this question that Richard posed to us of what have I learned about leadership or about leaders, it's really interesting to think about. And I'm interested in how I've learned as well as what I've learned. I'm interested in the how we learn these things. How does that happen? How do we learn about leadership? And I think, like lots of things, actually we start learning about it really, really early, but we don't realize we're learning until much, much later. And our earliest leaders are our families and our teachers and those environments that we grow up in. And actually, they're really profoundly important and they stay with us for a long, long time. And so I thought about that, and I thought about the fact that actually the models of leadership that we're given probably have something to do with whether or not we feel comfortable saying, yes, I'm a leader. So the stereotypes and models that we've been presented with, not just in our sector, not just in the world now, but all through our lives, influence really our knowledge of ourselves and how we can know ourselves and how we can understand ourselves. And it takes a long time to look back and reflect and think, well, there was something happening there around leadership that may have influenced me. So one of the things that I thought about in preparing for today was a moment for me when I moved from primary school to secondary school. And I grew up in Leeds, second generation Irish immigrant. I grew up in poverty, and where I went to primary school, that was the common experience. That was everybody. And when I went to secondary school, the thing that happened on my first day was that all of those of us who got free school meals were asked to stand in a separate line. And all I knew on that day was I wanted to stand with my mates and I couldn't. And this continued through the whole of my secondary school life. Now I look back and think, well, what was the leadership model at work there? Because somewhere along the line, someone decided this was a thing to do. Somebody went, what we're going to do is this. And there was probably, I imagine, some kind of management admin headache that guys solved by putting all the kids over here who got free school meals. But of course, the thing that got ignored in that leadership decision was the impact that had on people and any notion of empathy. And empathy and kindness have come up again and again and again. You're not be surprised it comes up for me as well. So those things stick with you. And I think we learn about leadership through the experiences we have, through trial and error, which people have talked about, through what we read, what we see, what we hear. But it's worth sometimes clocking those experiences that maybe have really profound value, and you will have them in your lives, those moments, those relationships, those things that happen that somehow help you to understand yourself better and understand leadership and the kind of leadership you value better. And again, it got me thinking when I was thinking about this question about something that happened to me really early in my career, going back about 25 years. I'm sorry, it is like ancient history. It was a completely different era. I was working at Contact Theatre in Manchester, and that had been my first job in the cultural sector. I was a drama worker working with kids in the youth theatre and in the education team at the time. And I'd been promoted, I'd become head of department, which meant it was my first leadership role, but nobody taught like that back then. They just went, yeah, head of department now, manage the budget, make this happen. And I was so excited because I loved the organisation. I loved the work we were doing. I loved the people I worked with. So I was very driven to get that right and to make a positive contribution. And then I made a really, really big mistake. And what happened was the theatre was hosting a play called Angels in America, which was transferring from Broadway. It was a really, really important play. It was a play about the AIDS crisis and the impact that AIDS had on the way in which society in the US was responding to homosexual communities and different communities of difference generally. So it's a really important play. It was coming to Manchester. You know, I'd been at Broadway, it was coming to Manchester, and we were completely stoked about that. And that team that I was working for, my community team, had created a piece of theatre and education to take out to schools to tour, to explore these ideas. And that was really important because this was not long after an act of parliament called Section 28, which some of you may be aware of, may have heard of. Section 28 made it illegal for local authorities to promote the acceptance of homosexuality. Illegal. So schools, which were all under local authority control, apart from private sector at that time, that's where they were. And here were we doing what I think I'm in the arts for, which is creating spaces of inclusivity, taking this play to all these schools across Greater Manchester and doing exactly that, promoting the acceptance of homosexuality. So what did I do? Well, I completely screwed up. I booked actors, stage managers, the van, the drama facilitators, the lot, contracted them, the whole shebang, for the wrong dates. In fact, I booked them for half term. So I booked a school's tour for half term when all the schools were going to be shut for this piece of work that really mattered to me. And for an organisation that I loved, all their resources. So I went to see the chief exec to tell her what I'd done. And I went in there not really knowing what to expect. And I was in there for about 20 minutes, and it was probably the most profound lesson in leadership I've ever had, and it stayed with me. I told Vicky what I'd done, and her response was to say to me, that must be terrible. You must feel dreadful. And then she told me a story about something that had happened in her career. She'd been a stage manager and she'd forgotten to set a prop in a West End theatre, 2,000 people, actor on stage, couldn't find the prop because she still had it on the props table next to her in the wings. And I said to her, what did you do? And she said, well, first of all, I froze. And then I thought about running away. And then I ran on with the dagger. And that in itself, I think, is an amazing metaphor for those leadership moments where you freeze, then you think about running away, and then you go, I'm just going to have to put this right. And of course, she said to me, well, what are you going to do now? And I said, I'm going to phone everybody. I'm going to tell them what I did wrong. I'm going to find out if there's a way of putting it right. I'm going to apologise. And of course, it worked out. But the reason I think it had those 20 minutes mattered so much to me and have continued to have an effect on me is because in that 20 minutes in that room were all the values strands, I think of them as, that I still hold dear, and they were there in action. So there was certainly empathy and there was kindness, and critically, there was emotional intelligence in there. And I think emotional intelligence in leadership is so profoundly important. There was clarity and there was transparency. and accountability in there, in that room. And it was really a discussion about that in many ways. But there was also a kind of a steeliness and a determination in terms of how can I do this now? How can I make this work? And I think a lot of what we do in the cultural sector is how can I make this work? This is going to be really hard. How can I make this work? And I think generally it's about almost stubbornly, I think, saying, I refuse to be the person who says I can't do this. I'm not saying I know how to do this, but I'm going to be the person who's going to keep saying, how can we do this? How can we work together to make this happen and to do it? So those things have been really important, I think, and have carried me through. And I think in all of that, this question about authenticity is right at the heart of it all. And I want to do a little bit of provocation here, because I think when we think about authenticity and being real, we often in our work, we think about self-reflection, don't we? And we think about and we all do it. We walk out of the meeting and you wonder if you could have done better. You finish the project and you think, if only we'd done that a bit better. We reflect on our role. And I think it's really important to do the work of knowing yourself, of knowing your true self, and knowing your idealized self, the leader you want to be, and working out what the gap is between the two. That's work and it needs doing. But I don't think you can do it on your own. I think you need others with you. And I think one of the kind of dichotomies and the problems of leadership, and particularly if you are in an organization that's got quite a lot of people and there's some hierarchy and structure there, is that the more you ascend into that leadership, that exec leadership level, the less likely it is you're going to get honest feedback, and the more you bloody need it. Because you're in a position quite often, I think, where people may feel that they don't want to tell you what they really think. And they may not want to do that because they don't want to hurt your feelings. They may not want to do that because they fear there may be some repercussion, if they're honest. They may not want to do it because they're kind of really trying to be that positive person. There are all sorts of reasons why, as you ascend through leadership, you're less likely to get what you need. And in our personal lives, I think I hope we all have that friend or that family member who will take us to one side and go, hang on a minute, wind your neck in, you've been a bit of a pain about this, whatever it might be, but they put us in our place and they tell it like it is. And I think it's really hard to get tell it like it is feedback when you're in a leadership position. And
Caroline, can I just tell it as it is and say you've got about a minute left, if that?
Okay, so then I'm going to move on. Lastly, then, I'm going to just move really quickly on to the thing about the kind of leadership we admire. And I'm just going to say Jacinda Ardern here, because I think the Prime Minister of New Zealand is amazing. And I think what she has done has been incredible on a world stage. And I'll give one example in the minute I've got, which is not actually the COVID thing. She's been brilliant, but it's Christchurch. It's the bombings in Christchurch. And if you remember what she did after that, she went out that day and she spoke directly to those people impacted and affected by it. And she put their arms around them and she talked to them, and the world saw that. Some may say she was cynical. I don't believe it. I think she was doing the right thing because it felt like the right thing and it was driven by her values. And the thing I compare it with is Theresa May in the wake of Grenfell, who took 3 days to go and talk to anybody. And when she did, she talked to fire chiefs and local authority chiefs, not to the individuals who had been impacted. And she didn't do it one-to-one. And she didn't make that personal connection. And the personal connection stuff, knowing yourself will give you that confidence, I think, to really talk to people one-to-one and to take that forward. So go, Jacinda.